Tēnā koutou Aotearoa. Welcome to the Export Beer Garden Studio. Welcome to the headquarters of the Alternative Commentary Collective, and welcome to the 2023 Christmas Week episode of the BYC. No Jason Hoyt this week. Today, though, we are reflecting on the scintillating double mashing of the Bangers by the Black Caps in the soggy bogs of Dunedin and the vitamin C, the glorious vitamin C of Nelson. Yesterday, we'll be talking fashion, dabbling in some super smash slog work, drooling at the son of Mitch's sensational IPL riches, and soaking up the twin vices of violence and poetry. I'm Paul Ford, godfather of the Beige Brigade, and I'm joined by sports writing aficionado, CEO, chief beer deliverer of the Bounce Substack newsletter, the Reformed Presbyterian, Dylan Cleaver. How are you, DC, and what is on your Christmas list?
Oh, jeepers, that's a good question. I'm not sure what's on my Christmas list. Some guitar picks. I'd really like a guitar pick. They just go missing. The cats take them. God knows where they end up, but I'd like a guitar pick. But I would recommend for anyone out there who's struggling for a gift, either sign up to the Bounce or get yourself a copy of Modern New Zealand Cricket Greats from Stephen Fleming to Kane Williamson.
Wow, straight into a full unpaid placement. Outrageous from you. Well done. So we've had a bit of cricket to keep our eye on this week, Dylan. We've seen the Black Caps in a 30-over special against the Bangers, 239 for 7. Bangladesh could only muster 200 for 9. New Zealand won by 44 runs on one of the quirks of the DLS system. And then, of course, off to Nelson yesterday, and it was a comprehensively wonderful run chase, 296 for 3, mowing down Bangladesh's 291 for New Zealand to win by 7 wickets. What were some of the things that caught your eye in terms of what was the good stuff? Will Young comes to mind? Yeah,
Will Young does come to mind. Double of 104 and 89. Quite frustrating that he couldn't get the back-to-back hundreds. That leading edge caught and bowled was quite a soft way to go out. But yeah, there's something about the way he bats that feels quite effortless and yet beautiful. You know, some of the shot making where he whips the ball off the stumps over mid-wicket, it's just really, really pretty. I haven't got great vocabulary when it comes to it, but I just really enjoy watching him bat, and I hope that's going to be the theme of the summer, actually. If Will Young keeps scoring runs, it's going to be a very good summer, even if some of the fare served up isn't top-notch.
Yeah, sweet timer of the ball. He's an absolute menace for Bangladesh too. He's played them 7 times. He's scored 3 50s and 100. He's averaging 56 against them. I mean, he's one guy they just don't want to see on there. And in terms of the couple of the other new boys, DC, Josh Clarkson, he did decently. He's sort of 3 for 54 in his 2 outings. Will O'Rourke, sort of 4 for 82, and then Eddie Ashok, 1 for 63. What did you think of the debutants?
Yeah, well, Clarkson's interesting because he's more of a batter than a bowler. Like, he's more noted for his clean hitting. So there's a little bit of disappointment that we might get to a little bit later in the fact that he hasn't had an opportunity yet. He came out very late in that 30-over smash-a-thon and ran himself out immediately. Didn't get an opportunity in Nelson. Will O'Rourke looks like he could be awkward. I was a little disappointed when he first came on because the speed radar was sort of showing low 130s. And I thought, oh, great, just what New Zealand needs, another angular 130-odd seamer. But that was unfair because it was obviously wet in Dunedin. They probably weren't that confident with run-ups. He looked a little timid at the start at Nelson, but I thought by the end of it, the Nelson ODI, he was looking really good. So there is promise there. And Eddie Ashok, it's just a little bit difficult to tell, 110. I mean, he looks like he's got some tools, but he's just got no experience yet.
I guess it is. It's a slightly strange series. I mean, we've talked about it before on the BYC podcast. You know, there's only 3 guys from the Cricket World Cup sort of starting 11. Chapman's there, Ravindra's there, and Latham's there. But it does have a bit of a curtain raiser feel to it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah. I mean, Bangladesh are a hard sell at the best of times. I don't think we're being overly mean there. I mean, and they've embarrassed us for thinking that, you know, a couple of summers ago when, fresh off a World Test Championship victory, we looked to slaughter them in the cosy confines of Mount Maunganui and then ended up losing the first test to them. So they have made New Zealand pay for complacency in the past. But I think it doesn't really get the pulse racing either. And maybe, I mean, it was great to see Tom Latham in Harvey Nichols' return to a bit of form, but at what cost? That was maybe a negative for me, that, middle order of Nichols, Latham and Blundell was really not edge of the seat stuff, or as you described it, about as exciting as a collection of paper clips.
That's right. God, I love a stationary collection. I do quite like a laminator, actually. I guess the weird thing about this series, too, did I read correctly? New Zealand doesn't play one days until they go to Sri Lanka, or is it Sri Lanka come here in November next year? Is that right?
I think that's right, yeah, because everything's T20 geared up for now.
So it's absolutely it's a very strange sort of situation where you've got someone like Will Young and I guess, Blundell, Nichols, Latham, they're sort of fighting for their spots or whatever, but actually, the next games are 11 months away. And so this sort of notion that they are fighting for their spots is a little bit manufactured for me. But in terms of Nelson, should it look good? Look like the kind of game you'd go to. You wouldn't really care about the result. Just get absolutely wasted on Rewalker hops in the sun. I mean, it just looked magnificent.
Yeah, it did, didn't it? I mean, it's a little... I used to like the old Trafalgar Park in Nelson because it was right in the middle of town, but the boundaries were impossibly short on the sides. This is a proper oval, nice oval. It's a long way out of town, which is a bit niggly. But yeah, just look, that sky just looks so blue. I'm not sure if Nelson has the bluest sky in New Zealand, but if it hasn't, it's in the top three.
The top three bluest skies. I did want to just quickly talk about Sumya. I mean, pretty incredible to score 169 and lose a game. I mean, I haven't looked at the stats, but that must be right up there in terms of big knocks for no biscuits. He rode his luck, 22 fours, 2 sixes, drop catches, run-outs, all sorts, reviews and so on. But it was a hell of a knock.
Yeah, it was. And I've watched that guy bat so often, and I've usually come away thinking, he's not much good. And yesterday kind of changed that narrative in my mind anyway. Some of those shots he was playing were fantastic and almost disdainful at times, pinging players over mid-wicket. But yeah, he did ride his luck. The Will Young catch was a bit of a shocker. And as someone mentioned on the alternate commentary yesterday, maybe put his catch in Dunedin a little bit in perspective too, because he kind of made a mess of that before he reached out and grabbed it as a specky. And he really did make a mess of that Skyer off Saka yesterday at point. He looked almost like he really wanted Nichols to come in from cover and save his butt, because he was circling awkwardly around it and then made a hell of a mess, but clearly made up for it with the bat.
Yeah, it did seem like the Bangladeshis possibly a little bit more at home in those Tasman conditions than the massive stitch up, of course, of New Zealand, sending them down to Dunedin. Possibly, is that revenge for the Sillett/Mirpur debacle, do you think, DC?
Well, I don't think they minded Sillett too much, did they? I know they were beaten there, but it was picturesque at the very least. Mirpur didn't have a lot going for it, did it? Yeah, it always makes me laugh when we send teams down to Dunedin to start the summer. I know I like to gently mock the good folk of Otago, but I thought they actually did pretty well to get 30 overs each, because there were at times there it was looking fairly bleak, and I have been to a test there where it's been fine for long periods and they haven't been able to play, and they've had to sprinkle kitty litter on the ground because it is actually reclaimed land from Pellichet Bay. So obviously they've done some good work there in the meantime to be able to get a situation where, even though it looked pretty bloody wet, they still managed to get a decent game of cricket out of it. Well, Will Young made it a decent watch anyway.
New Zealand, of course, fashioning a pretty phenomenal record down there too. Last 20 starts, 15 wins and 5 draws, 0 losses. So the Black Caps will be very keen to keep stitching teams up and sending them down into the Dunedin midwinter, i.e. start of summer. 9 countries, 20 wins or 20 non-losses against 9 countries over the past few years. Third game of the series is at Napier on Saturday. So I'm actually doing a little bit of ACC commentary for that one. So that should be lovely. What else has been going on, DC? Any other cricket news?
Yeah, there is.
I think there's a bit of fashion news you were going to bring us up to speed on.
Yeah, so there is some clothing news. Yeah, New Zealand has inked a new deal with Castore. Is it Castore or Castore? I'm never quite sure.
I think it's Castore. Yeah,
it must be Castore because it's not Italian, is it? It's British. Anyway,
or is it CA Store? I'm not sure actually.
let's just call it Castore. Castore is to become the official New Zealand cricket outfitter from the start of next summer in a 6-year deal. It's a fast-growing player in the sports apparel market, according to the press release from New Zealand Cricket, including among their clients the England cricket team, F1 racing teams Red Bull and McLaren, English Premier League side Newcastle United, and Scottish Premier League team Rangers. Chris Smith, New Zealand Cricket General Manager of Commercial, said, "There is significant alignment between the values and objectives of NZC and Castore," and I've annotated that to say we're both in it for the money. Castore spokesman and co-founder Tom Behan said his organisation was beyond delighted to announce the partnership with New Zealand Cricket. To which I ask you, Paul, what exactly is beyond delighted?
Absolutely steamed, I'd say. That would be where I'd be going with that, but I assume that's not what he meant.
Okay, the team play the sport the right way, positive, authentic, and with humility, which is everything we strive for as a brand. There is further similarity with the Black Caps and White Ferns, as those teams are not afraid to take on the supposed big players in the sport. And I've annotated that to say, just as you never beat Australia, we'll never beat Nike. The new agreement will mean New Zealand Cricket's long-standing international apparel partnership with Canterbury of New Zealand will officially conclude at the end of September 2024. Castore will be NZC's third official international apparel provider after W Star 2008 and Canterbury 2008 to 2024. And oh my goodness, please don't ever remind us of the W Star days.
No, it's certainly been involved in a few, what's the word, imbroglios, fracas, on that front. Of course, you can get your own Beige Brigade shirts at the ACC shop online or at beigebrigade.co.nz. Interesting. It is interesting. Castore are quite an interesting company. They are set up by a couple of young fellas, a couple of brothers from Manchester who used to be athletes. One, I think, played for Tranmere Rovers when they were in Div 1. I think he thought he was going to go and be a squillionaire doing that. Didn't work out. His brother was a pretty decent footballer when he was a teenager and then ended up having a crack at cricket. Never quite worked out. And then I think they worked in like corporate finance at one of the big four accounting firms. And then 2016, they got £25,000 off their parents, set the company up, pretty good at going out and getting money off people. And it mean that in a good way, getting people to invest. And one of the investors was a guy called Arnaud Massenet, who founded the fashion portal Net-a-Porter, and then a whole lot of money poured in and away they went. They got a guy called Andy Murray involved. Andy Murray's got a sustainable line of clothing that is part of the Castore empire. And it's turned into a gloriously successful company valued at £750 million last year.
That's a lot more than £25,000 initial investment from mum and dad, isn't it? I understand they were actually bloody close to getting the All Blacks.
Wow, it's interesting. I mean, the rise of sustainability and all that kind of jazz. Good on them. So at least, it sounds like a big number. I mean, maybe next time we chat, I'll bring the market capital of Nike, and we'll see that they probably are one of the smaller players on the fashion scene. But they were also the guys, if you remember, I think it was in Cricket News or Rees, can't remember, definitely in the World Cup. They stuffed up the fonts on the back of the English World Cup cricket shirts. Not only once, they got those all fixed, and they stuffed up on the fixed version. Version 2 arrived, and that had a different mistake as well. So they had to do a version 3 during the World Cup.
I can tell you what, fonts are very easy to stuff up, and as long as they didn't have Comic Sans on the back, I think they're doing all right.
Good to go. Yeah, fair enough. And speaking of Comic Sans, I guess the New Zealand, we should have a chat shortly, DC, after this short break about New Zealand's version of Comic Sans, domestic cricket T20, the Super Smash. Waiting! Yeah, well, DC, as I mentioned, the Super Smash is just getting underway. I think there is literally a game at the Basin if this very annoying sort of mizzle doesn't stuff things up. I think we've seen, only a couple of games. The thing that caught my eye was Finn Allen was released and Martin Gupta was playing. It's a very interesting combination at the top of the order for Auckland. Anything catch your eye in these early stoushes? Yeah,
it was quite a good game, that Auckland-Canterbury game. Robbie O'Donnell got runs. Martin Gupta looked very good. Again, there's that kind of that nagging feeling that Martin Gupta and Colin Munro, these guys, they've still got a bit to offer in T20. And then Canterbury had a terrible start to the chase, and Mitch came in. He's a guy that has got a lot of big raps on him. It will not be long before he's playing for New Zealand, even if it's kind of this sort of bilateral series, chuck him in for a couple of T20s. He will play for New Zealand shortly. He looked like he was going to absolutely get Canterbury home with something to spare, and they had a horrendous collapse. Dan Ruffins bowled very well. Jason's mate, Lister.
Yeah, Jace must be out of phone coverage, Dylan, because he didn't message us to say that Ben Lister had got 2 for 18 off 3 overs and that he should be back in the Black Caps as fast as possible.
Well, yeah, I think he's been scarred by him, hasn't he? He pumped for him so hard to get in the Black Caps, and then Ben Lister didn't have the smoothest of starts, and Jason is, yeah, he's scarred, poor bugger. But that's it. It kind of feels, yeah, as you mentioned, there's a game on as we're talking, well, hopefully, and it just doesn't feel like it's got that. Well, it hasn't got the marketing oomph behind it of an IPL clearly, or even a big bash. And what do we have here? We have the Super Smash the start of the Super Smash being totally eclipsed by news of New Zealanders getting riches in other leagues.
Yeah, well, and literally having New Zealand play within days. You've got the big bash. Yeah, absolute deluge of cricket. Pretty difficult, to be fair, for New Zealand cricket to find a gap in the calendar. At least they have coincided it with school holidays, and hopefully people kind of wind into it over the next few weeks. It certainly doesn't go for too long. Slightly bizarre situation Martin Guptill got him into. Don't know if you saw his dismissal, but it was getting very close to it's obstructed the field, isn't it? I was going to say handled ball, but obstructed the field situation as the ball kind of hit one arm, and then he could see it kind of going through his head, or I think he might have even had a crack at whacking the ball away with his hand at one point, but missed it. But the ball hit the wicket, knocked the bails off anyway. Debacle.
Yeah, he went for a swivel pull, got caught up in his kind of body, and then bounced back. And yeah, he did want to whack it away with his hand, but realised either way he was going to be out. And yeah, there's no such thing as handled the ball now. It was one of the rule changes brought in by the MCC recently. I'm not sure why, because something like that and something like what occurred in Mirpur with Mushfiqur, you're not obstructing any fielder.
No, literally not.
That is what the term handled the ball was designed for, was that kind of dismissal. So I'm not sure what was saved other than some ink on a scorecard by removing that or combining that with the obstructing the field ruling.
It'll be on someone's CV somewhere that their legacy was getting that, tightening up making the laws of cricket more concise. Hey, over the ditch, as predicted, Australia absolutely annihilated Pakistan, gave them an absolute pants down hiding, scored 487. Let's just not talk about David Warner's century, which was incredibly painful. And quite predictable. I know. I just hate everything about it. It's just, and it was a really good 100. And then Pakistan, of course, chasing 449, 450 for victory, could only get 89 together. And then I just saw before that they've had Pakistan have had their World Test Championship points. They've had deductions for their over rates just to rub a bit of salt into the wound, and fined 10% of their match fees. So another ignominious week for Pakistan cricket in Western Australia this time. Yeah, and some bold talk before the test that didn't quite pan out, how they were going to take it to Lyon and buff them over the top from ball one. Well, there were a couple that did come down the wicket to him and got stumped, but good intent. Yeah, it was just, the whole thing was a little bit weird and almost pantomime-y, I felt, with that test. New captain for Pakistan, Shan Masood, very good-looking man and a very elegant kind of player, but not really that good. My last memory of him was getting a fairly feeble pair at Hagley Oval as New Zealand went on their triumphant march to the World Test Championship. But look, Pakistan's just a team that you want to do well because they're interesting. It would be world cricket would be a far more interesting place with a red-hot Pakistan team, one that could take on India from time to time, although there's obviously political reasons why that happens very rarely. But yeah, it's not a golden era for Pakistan cricket, and frankly, this tour is going to be a bit of a shambles. Yeah, and you're right. They should be one of those teams that's sort of not being pulled apart at the seams by the IPL money, sadly, in a way. But they should be almost one of the more intact teams. But I guess what it means is that some of their players have to go and seek paychecks in other places, which means that by definition, it's sort of breaking up their team. Really, really difficult. God, they could have done with some, a quartet of their absolute best seamers on that wicket in Perth. It could have been a whole another story, but instead it was the Australians. And God, of course, David Warner got half a pair. I just remind you of that, but probably we can't dine out on that too much. And of course, Nathan Lyon on a seam-friendly Perth track picks up 2 for 14 and gets into the 500 wicket club. That another painful, but he's a terrific bowler. And there's talk. I mean, people that have watched him a long time are saying he's getting better, not worse, which is quite extraordinary.
So I've never known what to make of Nathan Lyon, and it's not often that I'm completely stumped for opinions on cricket, but Nathan Lyon's one of those guys that I've watched so much of him bowling, and I've never been that sure that he's all that good. It feels to me like he's almost developed an off-spinning version of Bodyline, and that's what's made him such an effective bowler. He will dart the ball in really straight and on that middle leg, and he puts that guy around the corner. He'll often come around the wicket and just bowl on the pads line, and that get-out shot that top-order batsmen have, which is just, the ball's on your hip, you tuck it around the corner and you get one, doesn't exist with Lyon because they've got those brilliant fielders around the corner that snaffle up catches. It's not the kind of art and guile of old worldy off spin where you float it up and try and get the batsman using his feet to come down at you. He doesn't do that. He relies a lot on the bounce of the Australian wickets to get those catches in close, and then he'll slide one straight across and catch the edge. And it wasn't really till watching him play in Perth, because I knew the 500 was coming up, so I watched him more intently, that I realised that, it's absolutely brilliant what he does. It might not be my version of classic off-spinning like John Brace will float it up and go through the gap and that, but he is just so relentlessly accurate and good at what he does and bowling to his fields. I don't know if there's anyone that bowls as well to their fields. We're not talking about Ashwin, who's almost unplayable in Indian conditions. This is a guy that...
This is literally on tracks where the fast bowlers are
exactly
wetting their lips.
Exactly. So it may be I may have been late to the Nathan Lyon party. There's something about him that I might not totally embrace, but my word, he's good at what he does.
And maybe we can undermine him a little bit by saying, in the same way that people used to talk about bowlers that bowled with Richard Hadley, he maybe is a beneficiary of what the heck is going on at the other end. And when you've got Stark, Hazelwood and Cummins all on fire, which they were very, very good in this most recent test match. Even Mitchell Marsh was pretty decent. Lyon becomes is perceived a little bit maybe as the weakest link, but underestimated at your peril perhaps.
Correct.
What's been happening have you been keeping an eye on this Mitchell Johnson scenario? I mean, he was commentating, but I think he was meant to do a bunch of what corporate lunch type events. Are you saying that he's been debarred from those?
Yeah. So he was doing a couple of, on behalf of Cricket Australia, some lunchtime events, and they decided that it just sounds very Australian. They've thought that his criticism was so to the bone that it was just too awkward having him speaking at these corporate luncheons. And to me, that's a very un-Australian way of going about things. They thrive on controversy. They thrive on headlines generated on news.com and the Herald Sun on Sunday and the Courier Mail in Brisbane. I thought this would actually be right in their wheelhouse and they'd be parading him around everywhere rather than putting him in storage.
Look, on a few levels, it's kind of bizarre. It's probably, as we mentioned last week, it's probably the one interesting thing that happened in the lead up to the Australia versus Pakistan test that no one else would have probably even known it was on, except for diehard cricket fans. Also, you didn't see David Warner bursting into tears when Mitchell Johnson saying potentially mean things about him. Warner off a duck's back for someone like David Warner.
Yeah.
Pat Cummins, all of the guys that they interviewed were kind of like, he's welcome to his opinion. And they just move on. They don't care. It's just not a drama for them. It just seems absolutely bizarre. And of course, is it ironic or hypocritic? What's the word I'm looking for?
Hypocrisy.
That they would take such serious actions against someone like Mitchell Johnson. And meanwhile, you've got someone like, Usman Khawaja trying to do something kind of good for the world. And, Cricket Australia, it just feels like there's some wild inconsistencies going on there in terms of grown men. Just they can deal with this stuff. It's just blokes being blokes. Who cares?
And it's so. This is what Australian cricket is built upon. Like the stories of the sledging and grade cricket in Sydney and Melbourne are just legendary. From the moment they are old enough to hold a bat, they are old enough to call someone at the other end a mother effer.
Yes.
This is, and Mitchell Johnson's criticisms, while he has admitted that he probably was gratuitous in the line about burning sandpaper, he's actually stood by them, and they're reasonable. They're actually reasonably thought out criticisms.
Absolutely. It's part of the great fabric of the game that people have views on selections.
Yeah.
We're going to start suspending people from doing corporate lunches because they say something mean about a current player. Seems absolutely bloody ridiculous to me.
It'd be like NZC basically stopping the BYC because of Jason Hoyt's continued attacks on Henry Nicholls.
Yes. Exactly.
We haven't heard anything yet, have we?
No, nothing yet. Nothing yet. I haven't checked during the podcast. Hey, the IPL was this week, DC. I'm keen to get your 2 cents on some of that New Zealand activity. I did absolutely love though the accidental purchase by the Punjab Kings of Shashank Singh. Who they literally purchased him, and then you could see them discussing, going, "Oh no!" And apparently there's 2 Shashank Singhs in the auction, so there was mass confusion. And bless her, the quite gorgeous auctioneer said, "No, I've put the hammer down. He'll be coming over to join the Punjab Kings for 20 lakhs." Yeah. And the paddle was raised, and the owners Nes Wadia and Preeti Zinta, they're kind of stuck with them for the season, at least at the moment. But there was certainly bigger news from a New Zealand point of view. What caught your eye?
Yeah, well, that story that you just mentioned did catch my eye, and I just wonder how that fella feels going into his first camp with the team. The whole world knows that he wasn't meant to be there, but he's there and he's getting paid. It's not a massive amount of money, but it could be life-changing for a young player, that opportunity. But I suspect he'll be seeing a lot of net time and maybe not a lot else. But yeah, look, as to what caught my eye, I mean, the obvious is son of a Mitch gets rich, very rich. And we've actually got a little bit of audio about how he was feeling watching that.
I guess your heart starts to pump a little bit as you see the pedals going up, and having been through, I guess, the auction before and going unsold, it was a pretty special night last night to experience that, and then obviously now to be part of the Chennai Super Kings is an exciting time ahead.
I was really happy for him, and I watched a lot of this auction because I had nothing else to do, and it's a really curious. It must be so nerve-wracking for the players watching it, because you literally don't know. It takes a long time before teams get involved because they don't want to show their hand too early. And that was the 2 teams were fighting for his services by their looks. And jeepers, it's absolutely gone out of my mind. Delhi Capitals were one of them, and I forget who the other team was. And it was about to be sold, and then Chennai came in really late. And that's when you knew he was going to get rich, because if they had waited that late, you knew that they had a ceiling that was above that. And yeah, look, fantastic. He has earned it. He has played unbelievable cricket across formats for the last couple of years. A late bloomer, and as he mentioned elsewhere in his interview that he did, it's literally life-changing for him and his family. So I was really pleased for him.
I'm glad he said that. It would have been disappointing if he got 2.7 million and said, "Oh, it's not really life-changing for me." It'd be like, what? He's kept that pretty quiet, that he's a, squillionaire. As you say, yeah, late bloomer, 115 international games for New Zealand, kind of squeezed into the back end of his career, really. And absolutely fantastic. I love the interviews with him as well. He's so humble, talking about it being his little girl's birthday and, this being a great thing for him. Took the phone call from Stephen Fleming. Yeah, that's right. Life size, whatever you want. And then obviously going into a team where there's lots of familiar faces. Of course, the inspirational figure of Mahendra Singh Dhoni, the sort of iconic Indian player in there. Fleming, the coach. You've got Ravindra that's in there. We talk about in a sec. You've got Santner in there. You've got Conway in there. They've got the former New Zealand physio even in there, Tommy Simsek. This is if New Zealanders don't have an IPL team, then this is it for you. There was an interesting little insight into the banal existence outside cricket during the IPL, where he said that he was really pleased to have Rachin Ravindra in the squad because he set up a PlayStation group for the team every night. So that was going to be really useful when they were stuck in the hotels, well, maybe the hospitals, because we know Indian people do go and stay in those during cricket games. But yeah, and what about Rachin Ravindra, DC? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I did initially have a thought that perhaps he was harshly done by. He was a trendy pick, right? People were saying that what tends to happen after a World ICC event is the players that do really well in that event, which Rachin clearly did at the World Cup, catch the owner's attention. They tend to overpay for them, sell a lot of shirts with their name on the back, and it didn't really quite happen for Rachin. And you finished me with some numbers which kind of make sense, really.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm stoked for him. He got $350,000. I mean, I'm sure he's absolutely relaxed and very happy about it. But there was quite a lot of hype going into it. But if you around him, but if you look at the bare numbers, he averages 16 in domestic T20 cricket. He averages 13 in international T20 cricket. He is definitely a punt buy, and I don't know why you would be going crazy for him. That said, good on him. And Fleming actually referenced this. He said they were prepared to pay. Well, he didn't say this. I am interpreting his words. They were prepared to pay a lot more to get Ravindra, and because they didn't, it meant that they had some cap left to really throw money at the wall for Mitchell. So, Daryl Mitchell, the beneficiary there of maybe Rachin Ravindra coming in a little bit below the hype, at least, DC.
Well, perhaps he can buy him a Rolex for Christmas then.
That's right. I hope he gets invited to the daughter's 6th birthday party in a year's time. What about Lockie Ferguson? What happened to him? I thought I saw that he got passed in. Did he get snapped up elsewhere?
Yeah, I think there's a rapid fire auction at the end for players that might have been passed in, and I think he was beneficiary of that. I think he ended up getting a decent payday, slightly more than Rachin, I think. Possibly, in my eyes, at least a little bit fortunate. I just don't think he's been in great form for a couple of years now. He didn't have a great IPL last time out, but maybe he showed enough in that World Cup that there's still a bit of life left in him. And the other thing that really caught my eye was our own Daniel Vettori doing a solid, ensuring that he's going to get an extension on that Cricket Australia contract by the looks, by making sure that his good mates Travis Head, Trav, and Paddy Cummings, little Paddy Cummings from the west of Sydney, got decent paydays with him there.
Well, I saw someone send a mean-spirited message about Daniel Vettori doing that, DC, and it was around the fact that he hadn't actually worked out how to win in India, so he needed to get Travis Head and Pat Cummins involved because they'd cracked that particular code. But, you don't need to dig into who might have sent that. Speaking of things IPL, news out this week. Don't know if you've seen this, actually, but news out this week that there is purported to be a second IPL that is going to be played potentially as early as September and October next year, i.e. in 11 months, i.e. before we even go to Sri Lanka to play, or whatever's happened, before the one day is against Sri Lanka. And this is likely to be a T10 league with all sorts of rules and regulations to protect and guard against cannibalizing the current IPL, so having sort of an age cap, making sure that the current franchises have the first chance to bid. I guess the very interesting thing about this is that the BCCI is working out whether they should hold the tournament in India or maybe in a new country abroad that's got lots of money and would like to take on global sporting events. I wonder who that could possibly be. Yeah. Having watched the IPL auction from Dubai, we can probably join a couple of dots here. And cricket, just the schedule, Dylan, it just continues to compress.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, did you say November, December, looking at that window?
September, October.
Okay. So, that's a little bit more relaxing for New Zealand cricket. I thought November, December would be tricky, given it's the start of the New Zealand season. They're waiting for a particular oil-rich company to come in and say, we'll have that, won't we?
Yeah, when you're running a $11 billion Indian Premier League or whatever it is. I mean, it's just operating like the GDP of some quite significant countries, sort of getting into the realms of that.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe we need to get onto something. Oh, no, I was going to say something a bit lighter, but I know what's coming up. So I'd say brace yourself. But before we head to Cricket Violence Corner, we'll have a little ad break. But before we do, just wanted to remind everybody that Topper Cricket Cuisine is happening. There's a prize pack available. Thanks to Leader New Zealand, you can win a Topper prize pack this cricket season, which includes an air fryer and toppers and a mini fridge and beverages. Every single Black Caps match, this will be on the card. So we'll be saying a keyword live on iHeartradio. All you got to do is text the keyword every match to 3236. You'll be in the draw to win. We'll see you back shortly.
Waiting!
Well, welcome back. And now it's time for one of the favourite segments of the show, Pull Forward's Cricket Violence Corner.
Pull Forward's Cricket Violence Corner.
Brace yourself. A young Australian man was sexually assaulted by a Cricket Australia executive at a staff party. Reuben Williams was a young staffer at the country's peak cricketing body when communications boss Timothy Whittaker sexually assaulted him after a workplace party in March 2019. Mr. Williams has since gone public about his traumatic experience to help others and to encourage victims to come forward despite the perceived shame of being assaulted. Boozy farewell drinks was held for Whittaker, who managed some of Cricket Australia's biggest scandals, a week before he was due in Dubai to take up a role as a communications manager for the ICC. As a court later heard, a smaller group moved on to another pub and then to Whittaker's Abbotsford apartment. A visibly drunk Mr. Williams fell asleep on the couch, and when the other guests had left, Williams woke in Whittaker's bed, half-dressed, with Whittaker assaulting him. He was later charged with separately assaulting Mr. Williams and another man, and would later claim in court that the stress of managing Sandpapergate and the sexting scandal of Steve Smith's successor Tim Payne had tipped him into alcohol-fueled crimes. This is me, not the story. This is a very pathetic attempt to get Smith and Payne embroiled in his dastardly deeds, which are actually much worse than any of the shenanigans either of those two Australian cricketers ever dabbled in. Anyway, Whittaker was found guilty but avoided jail, received a 30-month community corrections order, with the magistrate describing the assault as more opportunistic than predatory. But nevertheless, your moral culpability for this offending was high, and I denounce your conduct. And I denounce it as well. It is reprehensible with a capital R, but it's great fodder for a New Zealand cricket podcast.
Yeah, you warned me that it was going to be grim, and you weren't wrong. And jeepers, where do you draw that line between predatory and opportunistic? Jeepers. That's definitely headbutting the line of predatory, if you ask me. But I am not a judge.
And we weren't there, just to be clear. Hey, I've got Jason Hoyt is meant to turn up every week. And he said that he's going to start writing poems, but he said that literally the week before he's not at the podcast. So things have happened magnificently. And it is time, this is something a little bit more wholesome before we do your Who Am I, Dylan. I just think we need to maybe cleanse the palate.
Leaven the show a little bit.
Yeah. So this little breath of fresh air from Kieran floated into the Beige Brigade DMs this week like a delicious Usman Khawaja cover drive. And it does seem a bit wasted given it's a series against Bangladesh, but maybe it's more of something just to wet the whistle as we get into the summer of cricket. So here's Kieran's poetry nook. Where silver ferns unfurl against the sky, a willow whispers Cain's name, its sighs. Steady the ship, the captain's grand, with bat-like brush, paint runs across the land. He strides the crease, a stoic mountain's grace, eyes calm and clear, reflecting clouds' embrace. The seam of red, a challenge met with art, his blade a brush that dances on the heart. The ball comes whistling fast and wild it sings, but Cain unfurls a symphony of wings. His bat a wand, a conduit pure and true. It guides the sphere, a canvas painted blue. The cover drive, a swallow's soaring sweep, the off-drive late, a willow's gentle sleep. The square cut crisp, a comet's fiery trail, he paints a masterpiece no stroke to fail. Not fire and fury, but a measured song. His willow hums where runs belong. He builds an innings block by patient block. A fortress stands against the fiercest shock. For when the storm clouds gather overhead and wickets tumble, hopes begin to spread. All eyes turn to him, the stead.
That's marvellous. Was that Kieran? Did I hear that right?
Kieran, superb.
Well done, Kieran. You've certainly got one up on Jason Hoyt. Who has been promising to come to the BYC each week with a new poem. But so far, I think we've heard zero this summer. But I do have, as per my commitments, a Who Am I? And thank you to all those who wrote in last week with the answer. It was Terry Jarvis. And congrats in particular to Sam Goldwater, who added this lovely note. Hi, guys. Love the show. Thanks to your very generous hinting, the answer is Terry Jarvis. I don't know Terry personally, but from what I do know, he's an absolute legend. He donated truckloads of his Sky money to build a wonderful indoor cricket facility for the Parnell Cricket Club, which I use regularly with my two boys. Didn't realise he was in the Grammar Cricket First 11 at the same time as other legends like Burgess and Morgan. Pity the bowlers from rival schools back then. Here's to a great summer of cricket. Cheers, Sam. And thank you, Sam. And here, without further ado, is this week's Who Am I? I'm speaking to you from the grave, but feel sorry for me not, as I lived a rich sporting life. I have a curious first name, but it makes more sense if you consider a major theatre of action, if somewhat bloody action, in the year of my birth, 1916. As a batter, it was said that I was no stylist, but who said you needed a backlift to be effective? My strength was in my forearms. Just ask those who played alongside me in my other sporting love. As a batter, it was said that I was no stylist, but who said you needed a backlift to be effective? My strength was in my forearms. Just ask those who played alongside me in my other sporting love for teams like the North Shore Albions and Auckland Pakeha. I might not have been a Sutcliffe or a Stirling, two sporting contemporaries of mine, but I was pretty damn good. Who am I?
Jeepers. Were there any clues in there?
Yeah, the biggest clue in there is, well, there's an obvious clue that it was double sporting code, great. And the other clue in there was he was born at 1916 and his first name reflects something that big that was going on in the year that he was born.
I was thinking, I was going like Eric Tyndall and people like that, but I feel like I'm
not bad, not a bad guess, but
yeah,
not
that's
right.
Yeah. Nah.
Well,
the viewers are going to have to, the listeners are going to have to help me out, DC.
We are going to throw it over to the good listeners of the BYC. I'm sure someone will get it. They always do. Our listeners are fantastic characters.
They definitely do. So flick us an email to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs of the Beige Brigade on Instagram or Facebook. I'll keep an eye on that. Chuck it into the BYC chat. And if you're the first or if you send through the best story associated with the answer, we'll give you a shout out at the very least. Well, DC, I think we should probably wrap up, get out of here. I've donned my Christmas suit and I'm getting quite sweaty underneath here, even in this slightly rainy Wellington day. I think we might be good to go at the basin later. Good news. But before I do, I just wanted to say I am massively looking forward to doing some ACC commentary on the 23rd and 27th. And that is literally just the warm-up for the absolute carnage that is going to be happening at the Caravan End Festival at the Bay Oval at Mount Maunganui, next to the massive pile of cocaine there. The ACC Caravan is heading back to the Bay Oval for the Bangladesh T20s this New Year's. The boys will be commentating live from the ground, 29th and 31st of December. There's no shade. The only shade's going to basically be the Caravan. The first 200 people to join the ACC in the Caravan End Zone will get a free Dulux Steady the Ship hat and sports ears to punish themselves with the commentary. No special ticket needed. Text Caravan to 3236 for a link to match tickets. I'd suggest to you, DC, this is going to be one of those events that people look back on in a few years and go, I cannot believe that was allowed to happen. I mean, it's going to be one hell of a big couple of days.
They'll be talking about this like they talk about the original Sweetwaters. It's going to be huge. It is, it's going to be massive. I can't wait. It's going to be great cricket. And can I just say to you, Paul, it's been a pleasure. Merry Christmas. I'm not quite sure what our plans are for the next couple of weeks. We're probably going to have to make some up on the fly. But for all those listeners out there, just keep a lookout. Even better, hit auto download so when we do get together, it will land in your inbox.
Yeah, we'll definitely be watching some cricket, and I'm sure that some or others of us will manage to rendezvous over the next few weeks and get some cricket nonsense into your ears. Hey, thanks heaps for listening to the BYC over the last few years, but in particular over the last few months. Dylan and I absolutely love doing the World Cup in particular. It's just a bloody great way to get together on a quite often a Wednesday. Today's a Thursday, whatever. Get together when we can and talk cricket. But doesn't happen without producers like Adam, who always hits the buttons for us. It's the good buggers, Mike Lane and Joe Jury, kind of make the magic happen. And it's an absolute pleasure to bring this special pre-Christmas episode to you. Merry Christmas. Have a ripper and get stuck into this cricket over the next few weeks. Take care out there.